Welcome to Friday Night Readers. Fueled by coffee, we break down the books referenced on Gilmore Girls. Our little literary corner of the world helps you understand what the characters are talking so fast about and live in a world of books like Rory. Like short, read fast. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our Friday Night Readers newsletter community on Substack. You'll get instant access to a free printable list of 450 plus books on Gilmore Girls. Plus, even more Gilmore-inspired content, like our Rory Gilmore Reading Challenge, which we've been doing together since 2020. Paid members get exclusive extras. Come hang out where the real Gilmore magic happens. FridayNightReaders.substack.com.
Hello, Friday Night Readers. I am really excited to be with you here today for a few reasons. First, I checked our podcast stats this morning, and I was really surprised because I never check them. So I think in my head, is anyone listening to this? And I never really know. But I checked today, and our last episode, which was last month's reading challenge, the classic books from Gilmore Girls, got over 4,000 listens, which is actually really huge in the podcasting arena. It blew my mind to think that over 4,000 people listened to me talk. So I had been thinking about bringing the podcast back a little bit more than I have in the last few months. And that kind of gave me the impetus I needed, that this is the right move to go. We had a little bit of a slow start, and I think I really found my footing once I started taking a more improv style approach. And also another thing that you guys really like on podcasts is book lists. So both of those are going to be coming more often in the future. And I may also still go back to reading a few essays. Those aren't the most popular types of podcast episodes, but I do still think they're important for accessibility. And it's always hard for me to do those improv style because I spend so much time crafting the words in the essay that it feels weird to then talk about it not in their original words. So we'll just see where that one goes. Maybe I'll read them straight through again for accessibility purposes, or maybe I'll take an improv style approach to those as well. But either way, I think we're going to have more podcast episodes in the future. So back to today's episode. It is May. I hope Justin Timberlake is really happy about that. If you know, you know. And our challenge this month is to read books that Rory read on Gilmore Girls. I cannot believe that in the 6th year of now running this Rory Gilmore Reading Challenge, we never did this prompt before. But now is actually the perfect time to do it because, as you may know, I just finished up my 2 years of going through my rewatches of Gilmore Girls to get as many books as possible verified. And I do have about 100 plus books that I don't think you'll find elsewhere. So I really feel like I have the most comprehensive and accurate set of books to go from to say that, yes, these are the books that Rory Gilmore read on Gilmore Girls. A little behind the scenes fun fact, I have called this the Rory Gilmore Reading Challenge, and I used to call it the Rory Gilmore Book Club, and it's also often called the Rory Gilmore Reading List. And this gets a little bit of bad press because most of these lists aren't just about Rory Gilmore. The reason I call them that is for search engine optimization reasons. So when I do long form posts like this, I'm trying to get them seen by people. So I do keyword research. And what the keyword research tells me is that this is the way people are searching for it. So something as simple as calling it Gilmore Girls book list to be more accurate is not going to get it seen. And that's why I tend to refer to Rory Gilmore, but in doing so over the past several years, I've seen a lot of questions, namely on Reddit, where people are very skeptical, saying, but what are the books Rory actually read? And I wasn't able to answer that until right now. I'm so happy to finally be able to tell you, yes, I know all the books that Rory Gilmore read, and here they are. And that's exactly what we're going to read this month in the Rory Gilmore Reading Challenge. First, let's talk about our featured book of the month. In case you're new around here, the way our book club works is that I pick a reading prompt that matches several of the books on Gilmore Girls, and then you can pick whatever book you want. The reason I do it this way is because I know a lot of readers have read a lot of the classics, and I don't want to pick something that you already read. I also want you to feel really satisfied in your own reading life and to pick what feels good and right for you at the moment. That said, I do pick a featured book of the month, and that's one that I do a deep dive essay on. And the way I try to write it is that I try to make it interesting whether or not you've read the book. So I usually pull a theme out of it and then relate it to my personal life. And this is just to be a little bit more different than what's already on the internet. There are already book summaries, book guides, and things like that. This way, it forces us to just think a little bit more critically and connect a little bit more on a human level over books. So anyway, our featured book this month is A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. It is actually an essay. If I recall correctly, I read it in about an hour on audio. And it's really funny how these things work out because since I moved to Substack almost a year ago, I have always wanted to talk about a room of one's own because when I moved to my house during the pandemic, it came with a little loft that had bookshelves already in it, which was going to become my reading room. And that's one of the reasons we bought the house. And I've shared my reading room before in other projects I've done, but I've never shared it on Substack. And the moment just seems to always slip me by. It's something that's always on my mind every month. I'm always thinking to myself, is there room for my reading room post? And now there finally is. And here's the reason. I've been working through a lot of things on the back end of Friday Night Readers and in my writing and career life, and I've sort of expanded the Friday Night Readers brand. This is something I always intended to do. When I came over to Substack, I changed our book club name from the Rory Gilmore Book Club to Friday Night Readers because I wanted it to allude to Gilmore Girls, but be a little bit more open-ended to include things like seasonal living and all the feel-good stuff that we love about Gilmore Girls that is not just books. The way I'm looking at it now is a little bit more like a personal brand. I am your real-life Rory Gilmore. I'm the same age as her, and we have so much in common. And the 3 pillars within my content are reading, living, and writing like a Gilmore. The writing thing is new. It's something that I have been thinking about posting for a long time, and I've had some different ways I was going to do some educational content. I've been in the writing business since about 2019 and full-time since 22. And I've learned so much and have so much to share and have worked with creators behind the scenes. And all of these things I think are very interesting, especially on a platform like Substack, where it literally is a platform of writers. So I added this section on Substack called Room to Write, and that's where I'm going to put the writing stuff. And the way it's set up is that you can do both Friday Night Readers and Room to Write posts, or you can choose either or. So there may be some people who are only interested in writing and only want to do the writing content. And there may be people who are interested in just the Gilmore Girls book club. And of course, there may be people who are interested in all of it. This way, it's like a choose your own adventure, the way I set it all up within the Friday Night Reader Substack, because I had thought about doing a separate Substack and decided against it. So here's what I said on the Room to Write section header. These are the highs, lows, and messy middles I've lived through as a former lawyer turned full-time writer who wants to see you achieve a sustainable creative business too. I'm building in public on Substack, sharing the most and least impactful strategies I've implemented, and keeping it authentic and transparent along the way. I believe in hard work, consistency, collaboration, and dedication to your craft, not growth hacks. In A Room of One's Own, Virginia Woolf said, "A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write." Nearly a century later, Rory Gilmore found her own room to write on the reboot of Gilmore Girls. And here, I'm going behind the scenes on mine. This is our room to write. So what I'll be doing to feature this book this month is sharing my reading room. And then I'm going to write another essay that will be the first essay in the Room to Write section, which will be either about where I write, my home office, or the journey behind the scenes in my writing life from the beginning until now, or maybe a little bit of both. So if you want to read our featured book this month, pick up A Room of One's Own. And remember, it is an essay and you can read it really quick. It's one that readers have loved over the years. And I think it is both because it is short and easy and it has feminist themes. In case you're wondering, on Gilmore Girls, you will find Rory reading it on the bus in the episode 1.05 Cinnamon's Wake. If I remember correctly, this is when she's reading on the bus. And then Dean comes in and she jumps because he scares her. She's still in that stage where she likes him, but she's afraid of him. Okay. So now let's talk about 10 books Rory Gilmore famously read on Gilmore Girls to give you some ideas of what you can pick if you don't want to pick A Room of One's Own. If you head to the Substack post that accompanies this episode, you will see a lovely collage that has pictures of Rory reading each of these books on the show. It's one of those things that just makes you feel good to see, especially in an age when everyone is talking about AI, what's hard about living in a world with it, and what life without it looks like. So I'm going to go through these in alphabetical order. The first one is Atonement by Ian McEwan. This is the book that Rory reads before her first Yale class. Of course, Rory would go to college and read even before class. And I read this one, I think it was last year for the reading challenge. It's a historical fiction novel and it's about a young girl. I believe it starts in the early 1900s. And she witnesses something and makes a claim about it. I don't want to give too much away. But that causes something bad in those people's lives. And she spends the rest of her life repenting for it because she was actually wrong. It's a slow read, but the ending really packs a punch and makes you think about her as the ultimate unreliable narrator. So I do recommend that one. Next is Howl and Other Poems by Allen Ginsberg. This is in season 2, episode 5, Nick and Nora, Sid and Nancy. This is Jess's first episode on the show. And of course, he borrows this book from Rory, and then they discuss both the book and his notes in the margins of it. Next is Memoirs of a Dutiful Daughter by Simone de Beauvoir. I hope I said that right. Anyway, it is in season 2, episode 7, and Rory reads it on the couch at home. I'm actually not super familiar with this one, but when I read the description, it totally made sense to me that Rory read it. So I'm going to just go through the description with you because I don't really know how to describe it myself. So she is one of the great literary figures of the 20th century, and she gives an intimate picture of growing up in a bourgeois French family, rebelling as an adolescent, sound familiar, against the conventional expectations of her class, and then striking it out on her own with an intellectual and existential ambition exceedingly rare in young women in the 1920s. It goes through her friendships, her love interests, her mentors, and the most important relationship of her life with fellow student Jean-Paul Sartre, who is also referenced on Gilmore Girls. I know for a fact that Sookie references him. I'm not sure if anyone else does. And this is all set against the backdrop of a turbulent political time. So you may not have thought of reading this one, but I wonder if it is intriguing you because it certainly intrigued me, and I do see so many parallels with Rory. I'm not going to read it this month, but I'm definitely putting it up higher on my list. Next is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I love this image of Rory. She is sitting on the couch in season 2, episode 4 at her grandparents' house. And I forget what Lorelai and Emily are fighting about, but she's just sitting quietly reading between them as they argue with each other. And this is another good one by Virginia Woolf. It's one of those books that only takes place in one day in the life of a woman. And it's really about memory. If you've read the book Lillian Boxfish Takes a Walk, it reminds me of that one. I don't want to give too much away about it though, so I'm just going to leave it at that. We also have Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. This is season 4, episode 4. Rory comes home from Yale and reads it in the gazebo. And this is the episode where I believe Dean invites her to his wedding. So this is a less popular book by Jane Austen, but I've got to tell you, it really delivers. It's actually written more like a young adult novel, and it's a gothic romance of this girl who gets swept away into the books that she's reading. So of course, this is a great pick for Rory. It's a little bit different for Austen, but it's actually one of my favorites of hers, and I think it works really well on audio because it's not as hard as some of the other classics. I will say I tried to watch the movie adaptation of it, which was an older one, and I just could not get into it. I'd love to see a more modern adaptation of it, and I hope you feel inspired to pick it up because it really is great. I also think Jane Austen works so well in the spring, and if you want to read a classic in the spring but don't want it to feel too hard, this would be a great one. Okay, so now we have The Portable Dorothy Parker by, of course, Dorothy Parker. And you may recall this one. This is the book that Rory brings to the dance with Dean in season 1, episode 9, and then they fall asleep reading it. The poem that they read is called Coda, in case you just want to look up that poem. This is a long book. It's 656 pages. I personally don't know much about Dorothy Parker, but what I recall offhand is that she was a member of the Algonquin group, which is actually something that Taylor Swift also talks about. And I can't think of the word I want to say right now for her work, but it's like taking a look at life with a very skeptical point of view. And let's also talk about The Snows of Kilimanjaro. This is a short story, so another very brief one that you can read in probably about a half hour. I think it's 20 pages. And Rory reads this one under her favorite tree at Yale in season 4, episode 6. Hemingway actually becomes a really big part of her years at Yale. And I did really enjoy this one. I did need to look it up afterwards to get a better understanding of what it meant. But once I did, I really appreciated it. And I did think it was an interesting, well-written short story. One of the better short stories I've read, actually. I'm pretty tough on short stories. Okay, so Ulysses by James Joyce. Rory reads this in season 1, episode 20. I don't recall the exact moment. I think she was waiting for Lane, and she had her backpack on and was in her Chilton uniform. So this book is notoriously difficult. It is written in an experimental style. I believe it's actually considered one of the hardest books of all time. It's an Irish novel about 3 Dubliners. And as I click on the Amazon description to see what more I could tell you about it, it actually says it was banned in the United States on account of, quote, pornographic content. I wasn't aware of that before. Oh, and here's another fun fact that I totally forgot. The structure is loosely based on Homer's Odyssey. What makes it so hard is its stream of consciousness style. That's something you'll also see in The Sound and the Fury, another of Rory's books. Anyway, I would only pick up this one if you really want a challenge. It's also almost 800 pages. Okay, The Unabridged Journals of Sylvia Plath. This is the book that Rory famously reads at the bus stop when she looks so adorable in her little headband and she's so invested in the book. This is probably the most iconic shot of Rory from the entire series. I have a copy of this book. I have not read it yet. It is very long and the print is very small, which is actually difficult for me in the age of Kindles. When I can set the font to whatever size I want, it makes it extra hard to pick up a book that has writing that small. Anyway, Sylvia Plath is one of the most popular authors on our Gilmore Girls book list. Readers love to pick up The Bell Jar, which is also one of my favorite classic novels. And what Sylvia Plath is most known for is being depressed. She did actually commit suicide. I believe it was really shortly after The Bell Jar, and that was why The Bell Jar really took off. And by the way, The Bell Jar also includes themes of depression and how it was treated in the either 50s or 60s. I forget what the exact time period was for that book. So personally, I do hope to read this at some point, but it will not be this month. Lastly, The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. This is in season 6, episode 15, Vineyard Valentine. Rory reads this on the couch at Martha's Vineyard, which is my favorite vacation spot. I go there with my husband's family every single year. Do I think the episode did it justice? No, I do not. The episode looks very California and not very New England to me. But anyway, this is an interesting choice for Rory to read as a beach read on vacation because it is about grief. Joan Didion is a famous journalist and her husband died very suddenly and then her daughter became ill. So this is about a very difficult year in her life. It is a good book and readers do love it, but you are picking up something that is more serious in tone. It was actually a National Book Award winner and one of the New York Times 100 Best Books of the 21st Century. I'm also aware that it was adapted into, I believe it was a one-woman stage show. So I think that's interesting too. If you are able to either look that up on YouTube or go and see it in person, that would be an interesting way to consume this book. I have one more tip for you, and that is that you can also read the books from Rory Gilmore's graduation speech. I have linked a blog post about that in the show notes. Let's just run through a few of them while we are talking. We have The Sound and the Fury, which I've already mentioned. Moby Dick, another hard book about a whale, but a classic. This is the book that Dean sees Rory reading in the first episode, and then it's also on Jess's list. And by the way, she later discusses it with Logan as well. So if you want a book that spans all three of those relationships, this would be the one to pick up. War and Peace, another tough one, but people on Substack have been picking that up and reading it together. I think that's something that you can do with one of those Substacks over time because it would be another one that's really long and a challenge. Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, super popular book on the list. It was the first book mentioned on the show, a reader favorite. And I love this one because the show Gilmore Girls was actually created after Amy Sherman Palladino went to visit Mark Twain's home in Connecticut. So you get that nice little connection as well. A Confederacy of Dunces. I thought this book was actually pretty hard. It's supposed to be more comical about this kind of loser guy living with his mom in New Orleans and these adventures that he has going around town. I believe he's looking for a job, if I remember right. What's interesting about this one is that it is also read by Jess Mariano. And I will say it totally fits Jess's reading type. Of course, we have Anna Karenina. I do love Anna Karenina. It's long, but it's not really a challenge. You just have to read it slowly. And I also found it very helpful to read summaries after every chapter. And this way, if you pick this one, yes, it is long, but you get to walk away from the month knowing that you read Rory Gilmore's favorite book. And I will say it's one of the books that I'm happiest I've read in this challenge. It's one that I always go back to in my mind that really made a long-term impact on me. Rory also says she strolled down Swan's Way. And in the post, I have linked an article where I wrote how I think Swan's Way actually reveals both who the father of Rory's baby is and what happens next after those famous 4 words that ended the entire series. My understanding is this one is also a challenge. It is the first in 8 volumes, and you'll also see Max Medina loan this one to Lorelai. Next, Jane Austen. If you don't want to do Northanger Abbey, which we've already discussed, then you can pick up Pride and Prejudice. This is the book that Rory loans to Dean, and he reads it, which I think is actually really sweet that he does something that he knows she will like. And what I really love about Jane Austen on the show is actually the scene where Paris and Jess discuss Jane Austen and other authors. I think they just had the best literary banter. and I would have loved more scenes with the two of them talking about books. Finally, Eudora Welty. I've linked her collected stories, but she also wrote a book featured on Gilmore Girls called The Optimist's Daughter, and she's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and she's known for her Southern background and her short stories. This is a book that Rory shoves into her backpack when she's filling it with a ton of books, and she's saying, oh, this is my bus book, this is my lunch book, this is my other bus book. Okay, so that gives you a really good start to reading like Rory Gilmore with us this month. If you want the full list of 192 books that I have counted that Rory actually read on Gilmore Girls, then head to the Substack post. This one is for paid subscribers. And the reason is that it took me 2 years to compile the 477 verified books on Gilmore Girls, which in my opinion is the most comprehensive and accurate list on the internet. And then it also actually took me something like 15 hours to put together this post and podcast because I had to go through 200 pages of episodes to pull out each book that Rory read and put it into a list with you with little reviews of whether I loved it, liked it, or didn't like it. And then I also note whether I thought it was easy because I know people like to pick up easy books. Another thing I did was I added in a printable checklist so that if you want to track your reading just like Rory Gilmore, you can do that. There's a few things I want to note about this list before we go. The first is that I'm actually surprised that only 40% of the books on Gilmore Girls are attributable to Rory. What I actually found when I went through my 200-page guide, which by the way, I will be self-publishing as a book soon. Right now, paid subscribers can print it themselves. That comes as one of your other benefits of being a paid Substack subscriber. But anyway, what I found was that I actually think Lorelai referenced books much more often and much more naturally throughout her everyday language on the show. Here's the reasons I think this is the case. One, I think Lorelai just happened to be on screen more. Two is that we know that Rory's reading life did have some gaps. If you know, you know. And also, many of her books were repeated during the series. So while she's seen with books a lot more on the show, oftentimes they were the same book. So there's less books, even though they were featured more. Another reason is that a lot of times she only refers to an author, not to a specific book. So just so you know, before we go, a few more things I want to note about my list of the 192 books that Rory read. I did have to set some ground rules. There's always nuance in compiling lists like these. So here, the way I decided to do it was a book must have been in her possession or she must have referred to it unless it's mentioned in a class she's taken. So if her Yale teacher is talking about Hemingway, then I assume she is reading Hemingway for that class. The only time I did not do this is on her first day at Chilton, because if you remember, she comes into class, they're talking about all these authors, and it's her first day. She's overwhelmed. I don't think she would have read those books on that day. Next, if a book was spotted at the Gilmore house or in Rory's dorm or apartment, I only included it if it was on Rory's shelf, not on a communal shelf. So to me, Rory seems like the type of person who keeps all the books that she actually reads in her personal possession. And when you see what books are on the communal shelves, they really do seem like they would belong more to Lorelai or to Paris. Last but not least, if someone handed her a book, I assumed she read it. To sum up Rory's reading list, here's what I found. Her Chilton years were most often defined by the classics. And then we see an emphasis on Tolstoy, Dickens, Shakespeare, and feminist writing. And then at Yale, we see her pivot a bit. She reads a lot more Hemingway, a lot more political books. Remember, she did take political science, and a lot more modern bestsellers. This is where we see her reading things like The Year of Magical Thinking. And I love that because it just shows that even though she was in college, she was staying in touch with what was happening in the literary world. And throughout the entire series, we also see her talking fast about pop culture, like famous movie adaptations. Here's where you'll get things like The Wizard of Oz, which all characters will understand, not just the most literary ones on the show. Okay, so that is it for today. If you want even more, head to the Substack for the full list, the printable, the pictures of Rory reading, and so much more. I hope to see you there. Let's have a great month reading like Rory Gilmore. This is us at our best, isn't it?
Thanks so much for listening to Friday Night Readers. I love having you here in our little corner of the Gilmore Girls world. If you'd like even more feel-good fun, then upgrade to a free or paid email subscription membership at FridayNightReaders.substack.com. Paid members get exclusive extras. You'll also unlock members-only posts, as well as full community access to our chats. It's the coziest virtual place like Stars Hollow, and your support helps keep this podcast going strong. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's episode, please take a minute to rate and review the show. It helps other Gilmore fans find us, which helps me provide you with more content like this. Until next time, life's short, Read fast.